The wind screamed across the ice plains of Kithara Prime like a wounded beast. In the small cluster of metal buildings that made up New Busan Colony, Hana Kim pressed her face against the frosted window and watched the storm rage outside. The glass was so cold it burned her skin. "Another bad one tonight," said Elder Ko from behind her. The old man's voice carried the weight of too many hard winters. "The weather keeps getting worse." Hana nodded but did not turn around. She was 16 years old and had lived through every one of those winters. Each year brought fewer survivors. Each storm claimed more lives. Her parents had died in the last great ice storm 3 months ago when the farming dome collapsed. Now, she fixed broken machines and tried not to think about tomorrow. "How many left now?" she asked. 43 people. Maybe 42 if old Mrs. Park doesn't make it through the night. 43 people out of the 2,000 who had arrived on Kithara Prime 15 years ago. The planet was supposed to be humanity's new frontier. The surveys had shown rich soil beneath the ice and mineral deposits worth fortunes. What the surveys had not shown was how the weather could change from mild to deadly in minutes. How the ground would freeze so hard that nothing would grow. How the cold could seep into your bones and never leave. Hana finally turned from the window. Elder Ko stood by the small heater, rubbing his hands together. His face was lined and tired. Everyone in the colony looked tired these days. "The supply ship from Earth is 3 months late," Ko said. "We have food for maybe 6 more weeks." "What happens then?" "I don't know, child, I honestly don't know." The next morning brought clear skies and a discovery that would change everything. Young Day was out checking the water collectors when he came running back to the colony, his breath making white clouds in the frigid air. "Elder Ko, come quick, you need to see this." The entire colony followed Day to the ridge that overlooked the eastern plains. What they saw there made them all fall silent. In the distance, moving slowly across the ice, was a creature so large, it seemed impossible. "Is that real?" whispered Dr. Park Min-ho, the colony's scientist. The creature was the size of a building. It walked on 4 massive legs, each one as thick as a tree trunk. Long hair covered its body, but this hair seemed to shimmer and catch the light like crystal. Great curved tusks jutted from its head, and when it turned to look in their direction, its eyes seemed ancient and wise. "It's beautiful," Hana said softly. Elder Ko was the first to speak with any sense. "We need to get back inside. Now." But as they watched, more shapes appeared on the horizon. 5, then 10, then 20 of the great beasts. They moved in a loose group following paths that seemed to exist only in their memory. The largest one, the first they had seen, stood apart from the others. Even from a distance, it was clearly the leader. "How long have they been here?" asked Captain Lee Tae, a former soldier who helped keep order in the colony. "Longer than us," said Dr. Park. "Much longer." That night, the colony held its first real meeting in months. Everyone gathered in the main hall, their faces lit by the warm glow of the central fire. Elder Ko stood before them with a book in his hands. "I found this in the old survey records," he said, holding up a thick manual. "There are references to these creatures. The first exploration team called them ice mammoths. The records say they've lived on this planet for thousands of years." "Are they dangerous?" asked someone from the back. "The records don't say. But there are stories. Old stories about riders." Dr. Park leaned forward. "What kind of stories?" Elder Ko opened the book and read slowly. "It says here that long ago, before human settlement, there were people who could bond with these creatures. Riders who could travel anywhere on the planet, even in the worst storms. The mammoths were said to know every safe path, every hidden shelter." Captain Lee Tae stood up. "That's just legend. Stories to make the surveys sound more interesting." "Maybe," said Ko. "But look around us, we're dying here. Slowly but surely. If there's even a chance these creatures could help us." Hana listened to the adults argue back and forth. Some believed the stories, others called them foolish hope. But she found herself thinking about the great beast she had seen, the way it had looked toward the colony with those ancient eyes. 3 days later, their world changed again. The ships came from the sky like metal tears. They were sleek and black, nothing like the clumsy supply vessels from Earth. These ships moved with purpose and landed on the ice plains near the mammoth herds with barely a sound. Within hours, soldiers in strange armor were marching toward New Busan. They carried weapons that hummed with energy and moved with the precision of a conquering army. The leader stepped into the colony's main hall without invitation. He was tall and thin, with pale skin and eyes like chips of ice. When he spoke, his voice carried an accent none of them recognized. "I am Commander Vex of the Hegemony Third Fleet. This planet has been designated for immediate resource extraction. You have 72 hours to evacuate." Elder Ko stepped forward. "This is our home. We're citizens of Earth. You have no right." Commander Vex held up one hand and Ko fell silent. "Your species' territorial claims are irrelevant. This world contains materials essential to the hegemony's expansion. The extraction process will render the surface uninhabitable. We are being generous by offering transport off-world." "Where would we go?" asked Dr. Park. "That is not our concern. You have 72 hours. With that, Commander Vex turned and walked out. His soldiers followed, leaving the colonists staring at each other in shock. That night, as panic spread through New Busan, Hana climbed to the highest point in the colony and looked out at the ice plains. In the distance, she could see the great mammoths still moving in their ancient patterns. The largest one, the leader, had stopped and seemed to be looking back at her. For a moment, she felt something she had not felt since her parents died. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. The mammoth stood there in the starlight, patient and eternal, as if it were waiting for something, or someone. Hana Kim had lost everything. Her parents, her home, her future. In 3 days, she would lose even this frozen wasteland that had become her world. But as she watched the great creature in the distance, she began to understand that sometimes losing everything was just the beginning. The mammoth refused all riders. Everyone knew that. But maybe, just maybe, that was about to change. The second day after Commander Vex's warning began with desperate planning. The colonists gathered in the main hall before dawn, their faces drawn with worry and lack of sleep. Elder Ko stood at the front with the old survey book open in his hands. "There has to be something we can do," said Captain Lee Tae, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "We can't just give up our home without a fight." Dr. Park Minho shook his head. "Their weapons are beyond anything we have. I saw their soldiers yesterday. They move like machines. Perfect coordination, advanced armor, energy weapons that could cut through our walls like paper." "Then we need an advantage they don't expect," Ko said quietly. "Something they cannot plan for." All eyes turned to the old man. He looked down at the book, then back at the faces watching him. "The mammoths," he said. "The records speak of one in particular. They call it the Wanderer. It has lived on this planet for over 1,000 years, according to the old surveys. The first exploration team tried to study it, but it avoided them. Every expedition that came after tried to approach it. None succeeded." Hana looked up from where she sat in the back corner. "What makes this one different?" "Size, for one thing. The Wanderer is twice as large as the others. But more than that, the records suggest it leads all the mammoth herds on the planet. If someone could bond with it, theoretically they could command every mammoth on Kithra Prime." The room fell silent. Outside, the wind whistled through the colony's metal walls. "How many mammoths are there?" asked Young Day. Dr. Park consulted his notes. "From what we observed yesterday, at least 200 in the herds we could see. But the planet is large. There could be thousands." Captain Lee Tae stopped pacing. "Thousands of creatures the size of buildings moving in coordinated attacks. That could work. That could actually work. If someone can bond with this Wanderer," Ko emphasized. "The records are clear that many have tried. All have failed." Over the next few hours they made their plans. With less than 48 hours remaining, every adult in the colony would take turns trying to approach the Wanderer. They had located the great beast through Dr. Park's binoculars. It stood alone on a hill 3 kilometers from the colony, motionless as a mountain. Captain Lee Tae volunteered to go first. He had been a soldier before coming to Kythera Prime, trained in animal handling and survival tactics. He approached the problem like a military operation. Hana watched from the colony walls as Li Te marched across the ice plains in full winter gear, carrying ropes and tools. He moved with purpose and confidence, his steps precise and measured. When he reached the base of the hill where the wanderer stood, he began a careful ascent. The mammoth watched him come. Even from a distance, Hana could see how massive the creature was. Its crystalline fur caught the weak sunlight and threw it back in rainbow patterns. Its tusks were longer than a person was tall. Li Te spent an hour circling the beast, studying it, making notes. Then he began his approach. He moved slowly, hands visible, speaking in what Hana assumed was a calm, commanding voice. The wanderer looked down at him for a long moment. Then it simply turned and walked away, each step shaking the ground. Li Te followed for a few minutes, but the mammoth's stride was too long. Soon it was gone over the next ridge. Military discipline doesn't work, Li Te reported when he returned to the colony. It looked at me like I was missing something important, then lost interest. Dr. Park Minho went next. He took a different approach, bringing scientific instruments and samples of local plants that he thought might appeal to the creature. He also carried vials of synthetic pheromones that he had created in his small laboratory. Hana watched the scientist spend most of the day setting up elaborate experiments around the wanderer. He took measurements, collected samples of the creature's hair that had been shed, and tried various combinations of scents and sounds. The mammoth tolerated his activities with what seemed like patient amusement. When Dr. Park finally approached directly, offering food and making soft noises, the wanderer lowered its great head and sniffed at him carefully. For a moment, hope flared in the watching colonists. The creature seemed interested. Then the wanderer huffed once, a sound like distant thunder, and walked away. Dr. Park stood alone on the hill, his equipment scattered around him. It understood what I was trying to do, he reported later. I could see intelligence in its eyes, but it was like it was waiting for something I couldn't give. On the second night, with less than 24 hours remaining, Master Cho volunteered. He was the oldest person in the colony, nearly 80 years old, and he claimed to remember stories his grandmother had told him about the old ways of bonding with animals. Patience, he said, as he prepared to leave. Respect. These creatures have been here longer than our entire species has had space travel. They deserve reverence. Master Cho's approach was different from the others. He sat at the base of the Wanderer's Hill for hours, not moving, barely breathing. He sang old songs in a language Hana did not recognize. He burned herbs that filled the air with sweet smoke. The Wanderer came down from its hill. It approached, the old man slowly, each step deliberate. The colonists held their breath as the massive creature lowered its head toward Master Cho. The old man reached out with one trembling hand and touched the mammoth's crystalline fur. For a heartbeat, it seemed like a miracle was happening. Then the Wanderer stepped back. It looked at Master Cho with what might have been sadness, then turned and climbed back up its hill. I felt something, Master Cho said when he returned. A connection, but not complete. It's looking for something specific. Something I don't have. As the final night fell over New Busan, the colonists faced the terrible truth. Every adult had tried. Captain Li Te with his military precision, Dr. Park with his scientific methods, Master Cho with his patient reverence. Others had attempted their own approaches throughout the day. Some had tried bribing the creature with food. Others had attempted to demonstrate their need through dramatic gestures. The Wanderer had acknowledged them all. It had shown patience, even what seemed like kindness. But it had refused every single one. Now, as the hegemony ships glowed like deadly stars on the horizon, and their time ran out, the colonists gathered in the main hall one last time. Many families were already packing their few belongings, preparing to board the evacuation transport that would take them away from the only home they had ever known. Maybe the legends were wrong, said Dr. Park quietly. Maybe no one can bond with these creatures. Or maybe, said Elder Ko, looking around the Room, we haven't found the right person yet. His eyes settled on Hana, sitting alone in her corner. She had watched every attempt, seen every failure. Tomorrow the hegemony would begin tearing apart their world, and the Wanderer would still stand alone on its hill, waiting for a rider, who might never come. But as Hana met Elder Ko's gaze, she felt something stirring in her chest. Not hope, exactly. Something quieter, but stronger. She had nothing left to lose. And sometimes, that was exactly what it took to find something worth saving. The Mammoth refused all riders, until the girl who had nothing left climbed on part 3. The girl with nothing. The final morning came too quickly. Hana woke before dawn to the sound of people moving through the colony halls, their footsteps heavy with defeat. Through her small window, she could see the hegemony ships in the distance, their lights blinking like predator eyes in the darkness. She dressed quietly and stepped outside. The evacuation transport sat in the colony's center like a metal coffin, its cargo doors open and waiting. Families were already loading their belongings, what little they had managed to save from 15 years of struggle on Kythera Prime. "You should pack something," said Elder Ko, appearing beside her in the gray morning light. Hana looked around at the buildings that had been her home. The workshop where she had learned to fix broken machines. The greenhouse where her parents had tried to grow food before the storms destroyed it. The small room where she had slept alone for the past 3 months. "I don't have anything to pack," she said. It was true. Her parents were gone. Their possessions had been given to families with children. Her tools belonged to the colony, not to her. The few clothes she owned could fit in a single bag. "Everyone has something," Ko said gently. Hana shook her head. "My home is here. My parents are buried here. If I leave, there's nothing left of them anywhere in the universe." Elder Ko was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the colonists continued their preparations. Children cried as their parents tried to explain why they had to leave. Adults moved, like people in a dream, packing and repacking the same few items. "The transport leaves at noon," Ko said finally. Commander Vex was very clear about the deadline. "I know. The hegemony will begin their mining operations immediately after. The whole planet will become uninhabitable." "I know." Ko studied her face. "You're not coming, are you?" Hana looked toward the hill in the distance where the Wanderer stood. The great Mammoth had not moved since Master Cho's failed attempt yesterday. It remained alone, patient, eternal. "Someone should stay," she said simply. By mid-morning, word had spread through the colony. Families came to speak with Hana, trying to convince her to leave. Dr. Park explained the scientific impossibility of surviving alone on Kythera Prime. Captain Lee Tay described the brutal efficiency of hegemony mining operations. Master Cho offered to stay with her, though his old bones would never survive another winter. Hana listened to them all politely, but her decision was made. "Why?" asked young Day, tears freezing on his cheeks. "Why stay here to die?" Hana considered the question. She could not explain the feeling in her chest, the certainty that had grown stronger with each failed attempt to reach the Wanderer. She could not put words to the connection she felt to this frozen world that had taken everything from her. "Because someone needs to," she said. At 11:30, the evacuation transport powered up its engines. The sound was loud and harsh. Nothing like the quiet hum of the hegemony ships. Steam rose from its exhaust ports as the pilot prepared for departure. Elder Ko was the last to board. He stood at the transport's doorway looking back at Hana where she stood alone in the colony square. "There's still time," he called over the engine noise. Hana smiled and shook her head. "Take care of them, Elder Ko. Find them a good home." The transport lifted into the gray sky, carrying the last 42 residents of New Busan away from Kythera Prime forever. Hana watched until it disappeared beyond the mountains, then turned and began walking toward the ice plains. She had no plan, no ropes or tools or scientific instruments. She carried only a small pack with some food and water, though she did not expect to need them for long. If the Wanderer refused her as it had refused all the others, The hegemony mining operations would end her story within hours. The walk to the Wanderer's Hill took longer than she had expected. The ice was treacherous, and twice she fell into hidden cracks that nearly swallowed her whole. But she kept moving, one step at a time, toward the massive shape that waited on the horizon. When she finally reached the base of the hill, Hana stopped and looked up. The Wanderer stood exactly where it had been for the past 3 days, motionless as a mountain. Its crystalline fur caught the weak sunlight and threw it back in patterns that hurt to look at directly. She began to climb. The hill was steeper than it had appeared from a distance. Her boots slipped on the icy rocks, and the thin air made her breathing harsh and painful. But she continued upward, not rushing, not trying to prove anything, just climbing. The Wanderer watched her approach. As she got closer, Hana could see details that had been invisible from the colony. The creature's eyes were not just ancient. They were wise in a way that spoke of thousands of years of patient observation. Its tusks were carved with natural patterns that looked almost like writing. Its breath created clouds of steam that sparkled with ice crystals. When Hana reached the top of the hill, she was perhaps 10 meters from the great beast. Close enough to smell its musky scent, to hear the slow rhythm of its breathing, to see the individual strands of crystalline fur that covered its massive body. The Wanderer looked down at her with those ancient eyes, and Hana felt herself being measured in ways she could not understand. She did not approach with ropes or treats or ceremonies. She did not try to demonstrate her need or prove her worthiness. Instead, she simply walked to the creature's front leg and sat down beside it, her back against the warm bulk of its massive foot. "Hello," she said quietly. The Wanderer made no response. Hana pulled her knees up to her chest and looked out over the ice plains. In the distance, she could see the hegemony ships preparing for their mining operations. Soon this entire world would be torn apart and consumed. "Everyone else is gone," she told the Wanderer. "It's just us now." She talked to the great creature as the hours passed. She told it about her parents, how they had died trying to save the greenhouse during the last great storm. She described the workshop where she had learned to fix broken things and how she had always felt more comfortable with machines than with people. She explained why she had stayed behind when everyone else left. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she said. "This is my home. Even if it's cold and broken and about to be destroyed, it's still home. I'd rather die here than live somewhere else." The Wanderer listened without moving, its breathing slow and steady. As the sun began to set, painting the ice plains in shades of gold and red, Hana felt a strange peace settle over her. She had made her choice. Whatever happened next, she had chosen to face it here, in the place where she belonged. "I'm not asking you to save me," she whispered to the Wanderer. "I'm not asking you to save the colony or fight the hegemony. I just wanted someone to know that I stayed, that this place mattered to someone." The great Mammoth was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, it lowered its massive head until it was level with where Hana sat. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Wanderer had found what it was looking for, not someone who wanted to ride it, someone who simply wanted to stay. When the Wanderer lowered its great head toward Hana, something changed in the air around them. The wind stopped howling. The ice crystals in the creature's breath hung motionless like tiny stars. Even Hana's heartbeat seemed to slow and match the ancient rhythm of the mammoth's breathing. She reached out with one small hand and touched the crystalline fur on the Wanderer's massive snout. The moment her skin made contact, the world exploded into sensation. Hana gasped as images flooded her mind. She saw Kythera Prime as it had been thousands of years ago, when the ice first came and covered the green valleys. She felt the patience of creatures who had survived ice ages and meteor strikes and the slow turning of seasons that lasted decades. She understood suddenly that the Wanderer was not just a beast but a guardian, one of many who had protected this world since before humans had learned to make fire. "You've been waiting," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. The connection between them grew stronger. Through the Wanderer's ancient senses, Hana could feel every living thing on Kythera Prime. The herds of mammoths scattered across the ice plains, all connected by invisible threads of understanding. The small creatures that burrowed beneath, the snow. Even the hardy plants that grew in the planet's few warm valleys, and she could feel something else. A network of awareness that stretched across continents, linking every mammoth on the planet into a single vast consciousness. The Wanderer was not just the leader of one herd, it was the heart of an entire world spirit. The hegemony, Hana said, understanding flooding through her. You know what they're going to do. Images flashed through their shared connection. Mining machines tearing into the planet's crust. Chemicals poisoning the water that flowed beneath the ice. The slow death of everything that made Kithra Prime alive. The Wanderer had been waiting not for a master, but for someone who cared about the world itself more than their own survival. Someone who would stay and fight even when there was no hope of winning. As their bond deepened, Hana felt herself changing. Her senses expanded beyond anything human. She could hear the heartbeats of mammoth herds hundreds of kilometers away. She could feel the slow pulse of the planet's core and the whisper of wind across ice plains that stretched to the horizon. Show me, she said. The Wanderer stood, and Hana found herself rising with it. Not climbing onto its back, but somehow sharing its strength and size. When the great creature took a step, she felt the power in its massive legs. When it lifted its head to call across the ice plains, she felt the sound resonating through her bones. The call that went out was unlike anything the planet had heard in centuries. It was not just noise, but meaning, carried on frequencies that touched every mammoth on Kithra Prime. It spoke of danger and purpose, of an ending that could become a beginning. And they answered. From valleys hidden beneath the ice, mammoths emerged into the fading daylight. From caves carved into mountainsides, ancient creatures stirred and began their march toward the Wanderer's Hill. Family groups that had wandered alone for decades turned and headed toward a gathering that had not happened in living memory. Hana, still connected to the Wanderer's consciousness, felt each arrival like a heartbeat. 20 mammoths became 50. 50 became 100. 100 became more than she could count. They're beautiful, she said, tears freezing on her cheeks as she watched the great beasts converge from every direction. Through her bond with the Wanderer, she could sense each individual personality, the fierce matriarch who led the eastern herds, the young bull who had never seen others of his kind, the ancient cow who remembered when the ice first began to melt in the southern valleys, but their gathering did not go unnoticed. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, bright lights appeared on the horizon. The hegemony forces were moving, their vehicles racing across the ice toward the mammoth gathering. Through the Wanderer's enhanced senses, Hana could hear Commander Vex's voice crackling over radio communications. Confirmed. Large gathering of native fauna at grid reference 77 Alpha, moving to disperse before beginning mining operations. They think we're just animals in their way, Hana said, anger building in her chest. The Wanderer's response was not anger, but something deeper, a resolve that had been building for 1,000 years. Through their connection, Hana felt the creature's memories of other invasions, other threats to the world it had sworn to protect. This was not the first time strangers had come to take what did not belong to them, but it would be the last. What do we do? Hana asked. The answer came not in words, but in understanding. The mammoths had not gathered to run or hide. They had come to fight for their home, and they would need someone to guide them who understood both their ancient wisdom and the modern threat they faced. As the hegemony vehicles drew closer, their energy weapons charging with an ominous hum, Hana made her choice. She pulled herself up onto the Wanderer's broad back, her small human form dwarfed by the creature's massive size. The moment she settled into place, the bond between them completed itself. She was no longer just Hana Kim, the orphaned mechanic from New Busan colony. She was part of something larger, older, and infinitely more powerful. The Wanderer reared up on its hind legs, its tusks gleaming in the light from the approaching vehicles. Around them, 200 mammoths did the same, their combined roar shaking the ice plains and echoing off the mountains. Commander Vex's voice crackled over the radio again, but this time there was uncertainty in his tone. Command, be advised. The native creatures are exhibiting unusual behavior. They appear to be organized. From her position high on the Wanderer's back, Hana could see the hegemony forces spreading into attack formation. Energy weapons powered up, casting an eerie, blue glow across the ice. Armored vehicles took defensive positions, their crews confident in their technological superiority. They had no idea what they were facing. Through her connection to the Wanderer and the Mammoth network, Hana could sense every detail of the approaching battle. She knew where each enemy vehicle would move, could feel the fear starting to creep into the hegemony soldiers' minds as they realized the Mammoth gathering was not random. "For Kithara Prime," she whispered. The Wanderer trumpeted once, more a sound that carried across the ice plains like thunder. Then, with the grace of creatures who had survived ice ages, and the power of beings who weighed hundreds of tons, the Mammoth army began its charge. Behind them, the aurora danced across the sky in sheets of green and gold, as if the planet itself was celebrating the moment when its guardians finally chose to fight back. The battle for Kithara Prime had begun, and for the first time in centuries, the Mammoths were not alone. The charge of 200 mammoths across the frozen plains of Kithara Prime was like watching mountains come alive. The ground shook with each thundering step. Ice cracked and split beneath their massive feet. The air filled with their ancient battle cries, sounds that had not been heard on this world for 1,000 years. Hana rode high on the Wanderer's back, her small human form somehow perfectly balanced despite the creature's rolling gait. Through their bond, she could feel every mammoth in the charging herd. She knew their positions, their intentions, their fierce determination to protect their home. The hegemony forces opened fire when the mammoths were still 500 meters away. Energy beams lanced through the night, striking crystalline fur and thick hide. Some of the smaller mammoths stumbled, wounded but not stopped. Their pain flowed through the network connection, but so did their resolve. "Impossible," Commander Vex's voice crackled over the radio. "Our weapons should have dropped them instantly." What the hegemony soldiers did not understand was that these were not ordinary beasts. The mammoths had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts. Their crystalline fur was not just beautiful, it was armor evolved over millions of years to deflect energy and absorb impacts that would destroy lesser creatures. The first mammoth reached the hegemony line and simply stepped on an armored vehicle. The metal crumpled like paper beneath feet that had walked across continents. Other mammoths used their tusks to flip vehicles or swept their trunks to knock soldiers aside like toys. But the hegemony forces were not helpless. They regrouped quickly, using their superior mobility to strike and retreat. Energy weapons found gaps in the mammoth armor. Explosive charges brought down some of the great beasts. Through her connection to the Wanderer, Hana felt every wound, as if it were her own. The pain of the mammoth network flowed through her, but so did something else. A message that came not in words, but in pure understanding. The mammoths were not trying to destroy the hegemony forces. They were trying to show them something. "Stop," Hana called to the Wanderer, and the great creature slowed its charge. Around them, the battle continued, but now Hana could see what the mammoths had been trying to communicate. Many of the hegemony soldiers were not firing at the creatures anymore. They stood in shock, watching beings that should have been extinct legends moving with intelligence and purpose. Some had even lowered their weapons. "What are you?" Commander Vex demanded, his voice carrying across the battlefield through external speakers. His command vehicle had stopped just out of reach of the mammoth line, and he stood in, its open hatch staring at Hana on the Wanderer's back. "I am someone who chose to stay home," Hana called back, her voice somehow carrying clearly through the night air. "This is not your home. You are human. This planet belongs to the hegemony now." The Wanderer stepped forward, and Hana felt the creature's ancient wisdom flowing through her. "This planet belongs to itself. We are just its guardians." Commander Vex raised his personal weapon, a sleek energy rifle that hummed with deadly power. "One shot will end this foolishness." But before he could fire, something unexpected happened. One of his own soldiers stepped between them, lowering his helmet to reveal a face marked with the ritual scars of a conquered species. "Commander," the soldier said, his voice heavy with an accent that spoke of distant worlds, "these creatures fight to protect their home. They do not seek conquest or glory. They ask only to live. Stand down, Corporal Rax, Vex ordered. No, sir. The soldier removed his weapon and placed it on the ground. My people were conquered because we fought each other instead of working together. But look at this. Human and Mammoth, moving as one mind. Fighting not for territory or resources, but for the right to exist. More soldiers began to lower their weapons. They came from dozens of conquered worlds, species forced to serve in the hegemony military. Many had never seen masters who fought alongside their subjects instead of commanding from safety. This is mutiny, Vex snarled. This is choice, said another soldier, a tall being with blue-scaled skin. Something we have not had in many years. Through her connection to the Mammoth network, Hana felt a new understanding bloom. The hegemony was not a single species but a collection of conquered peoples bound together by fear and force. Many of them longed for what they saw here, genuine cooperation between different forms of life. She slid down from the wanderer's back and walked toward the hegemony lines. The great Mammoth followed her, each step deliberate and careful. Other mammoths moved with them, forming a protective circle but not threatening. You can stay, Hana said, addressing not just Commander Vex but all the soldiers watching. Not as conquerors but as friends. We can build something new here, something that honors both your needs and ours. Impossible, Vex said, but his voice lacked conviction. Why? Hana asked simply. Because your leaders told you so? Because you have always taken what you needed instead of asking for it? She gestured to the mammoths around her, their crystalline fur catching the aurora light. These creatures have lived here for thousands of years. They know every safe path, every hidden valley, every source of water and shelter. They could teach you how to survive here without destroying what already exists. Corporal Rax stepped forward. What would you ask in return? Respect, Hana said. Help us rebuild what was lost. Share your knowledge as we share ours. Defend this world instead of consuming it. One by one, soldiers began removing their helmets and laying down their weapons. They came from a dozen different species, but they all shared the same expression. Hope, mixed with desperate longing for something better than endless conquest. Commander Vex found himself standing alone, his authority crumbling as his own forces chose a different path. When he raised his weapon toward Hana, the Wanderer stepped forward with a rumble that shook the ground. Stand down, Commander, said Corporal Rax gently. The war is over. Vex looked around at his former soldiers, at the mammoth army that had not destroyed them when it could have, at the young human woman who had offered partnership instead of demanding surrender. Slowly he lowered his weapon. 3 months later, New Busan had grown into something unprecedented. The returning colonists found their settlement expanded with shelters built from hegemony materials and mammoth-crafted ice. Former soldiers worked alongside human farmers to establish greenhouses that could survive the worst storms. Mammoth. Herds grazed peacefully near research stations where scientists from a dozen worlds studied sustainable ways to live on Kithara Prime. Hana stood on the same hill where she had first touched the Wanderer, watching the sunset paint the ice plains. In shades of gold and red, the great mammoth stood beside her, patient and eternal as always. Do you think it will last? She asked. The Wanderer's response came not in words, but in images shared through their bond. She saw the future spreading out like ripples on a pond. Other worlds where the hegemony's former soldiers carried the message of cooperation instead of conquest. Planets where indigenous species and newcomers learned to build together instead of fighting for dominance. The change would be slow, measured in generations rather than years. But it had begun here, on a frozen world at the edge of known space, when a girl with nothing left to lose chose to stay and fight for her home. Thank you, Hana whispered to the Wanderer, for waiting for me. The ancient creature's only response was to lower its great head and touch her gently with its trunk. But through their bond she felt its approval and something else. Gratitude that after 1,000 years of patience, it had finally found someone worthy of the trust its species had been saving for exactly the right moment. In the distance, human, children and young aliens played together in the snow while their parents worked side by side to build a better world. The mammoth refused all riders until it found the one who understood that true strength came not from domination, but from the courage to care about something bigger than yourself.